All right, so to start off the program, we have something special for you. We are going to invite out Derek Jeter and Jaymee Messler from the Players Tribune. Please welcome them. Welcome. See?
Hello.
Hi, how are
Thank you for coming.
Thanks, buddy.
Thank you, sir.
Ah,
Excellent. All right. Thank you so much for being here. We've got waters there if you need it.
I want to first of all apologize for anything I might say. I didn't sleep last night. It may not make sense. We'll clear it up later.
Well, I'm not sure why you wouldn't sleep. I don't know what you were doing yesterday, but I mean, congratulations on your number retirement.
Thank
Big
you.
milestone, so
Thank you.
very nice. So let's talk a little bit about Players Tribune. You founded it about 2.5 years ago with the thesis that athletes had interesting, compelling things to say, but they felt that the filter of the media would not allow them to say it in the proper context. Does that sound about right?
Similar.
Okay.
It's, playing here in New York for 20 years and having friends and play at all different sports. I don't want to say that athletes are scared to speak to the media. I think they're just very, very careful of what they say, because I think a lot of times people are looking for headlines and they twist and turn their words. And I thought, if athletes had a trusted platform where they could speak openly and honestly, you'd be surprised at what they would say. And, we based our company on that thesis, and we've had a lot of success and a lot of athlete contributors over the years. But it's just amazing because athletes are not one-dimensional. They have other interests. And, a lot of media outlets don't have the time, and more importantly, don't have the space to cover everyone. So that's how we started the company.
And what was this based somewhat on I know throughout your career you had a relationship with the press that, some people saw as a little bit closed, but maybe careful is the better word, for maybe similar reasons that you said. Do you think you would have been more open if you had a platform like the Tribune in 1996? When you're saying, hey, I can actually say some things continuously without somebody chopping it up or misinterpreting.
Yeah, but the one thing is I'm not complaining about a relationship with the media. I had a great relationship with the media. I felt as though they treated me fairly my entire career, but my job was to limit distractions for my team. So, a lot of times people said, well, you give the same answers, and I say, well, you ask the same questions, I'm going to give the same answers. So yeah, having a trusted platform where someone's not trying to just look for headlines, then, I might have shared a little bit more, but, this wasn't about me. I'm private to begin with, so there's some things that I choose not to share on purpose, and I would never share those things. But I think a lot of athletes, that I've spoken to, wish they would have had something like this when they were playing.
Well, there have been a couple of pieces. I'm a reader. There are a couple of standout pieces for me over the past couple of years. I really liked Nerd, a piece by Von Miller about his early childhood. Richard Sherman also wrote a piece called "Why I Hate Thursday Night Football," about the punishing schedule he felt that Thursday Night Football put on players' bodies. And it felt to me like that may have been an example of a situation where if he'd have said, hey, Thursday Night Football stinks, the media would have definitely taken that and run with it and would have created something. But he was able to put it in the context of his schedule, which I found was clever. Do you encourage that in players? Like, hey, you have something to say. How much help do you give them, basically, and how to structure those things?
Well, I think we want to be a place where athletes can share, whether it's humanizing them, so whether it's stories about, compelling stories about their personal lives, adding that humanity, or it may be part of the news cycle where an athlete just needs a place to share what's happening or setting the record straight so that they can move on in a situation. So I think it can be either way. When we first started, I think we were probably talking to a lot of athletes, making sure they understood who we were and what our goals were. And now more and more, I think a lot of athletes are reaching out to us when they have something specific that they want to share.
So you've had 1,500 or so contributors so far. Do you consider those pieces on the site as journalism? Are they essays? Or are they something else?
Honestly, it's first-person storytelling, and it's bringing athletes and fans directly together with this authenticity. And so we kind of fit in between. We're a media platform, and we're a place where athletes are like I said, sharing anything that they feel needs to be shared. But it's kind of like a compliment to the media. We're not replacing media. People aren't coming to the Players Tribune for stats and scores. I think you're coming to the Players Tribune to hear directly from an athlete on what's going on, or we've had some of the most compelling stories on the site that aren't even the biggest names, and one of the editors on our team compared it to like the best chapter in a book, and I think that's a really good way to talk about, especially the long form editorial pieces.
And when you're working with the athletes to publish these, what kind of help do you give them? Like, how are they, when they come to you, how fully formed are their stories? Do you find that a lot of them just flow out of them, or do you have to give them a lot of editing help, that sort of thing?
It depends on the athlete. You know, we've had athletes that have written the entire thing from first word to the last word, and they've submitted it, and this is what they want, and you let it out. But you know, we have writers, we have editors that talk to the athletes, and a lot of times there's no story going into it. You know, you just get to know the team, and you start talking, and then a topic comes up, and we find out what they're interested in, and that's how the story comes about. So, you know, we have people, we wanted to equip the athletes with the proper tools so they could do it in an effective manner, but it depends on the athlete.
And I think that's a good way of saying it. We're kind of like the toolbox for the athletes. We want to give them the best editors, the best photographers, the best videographers, and usually there's a relationship that's formed. So most of the athletes, you mentioned over 1,500, they have their own editor that they just get to know. So through conversation, a lot of the time, stories are coming out of that.
Mm-hmm. They build a relationship with your staff, that sort of thing. We have plenty of founders and partners, co-founders in the audience, and so I'm sure they'd be curious as what your dynamic is. How do you work together? How do you divide responsibilities, that sort of thing?
I do everything.
Got it. I'm guessing that's exactly the opposite.
It's actually been really interesting. As we've grown, it's kind of evolved in terms of, like, when we first started the company, Derek and I were meeting with a lot of different athletes just to also make sure that they understood what we were trying to create, and that the need was there, and how do we create it so we are something that is actually something that could be a solution for a lot of athletes. And then it grew into building more of a business. So, you know, Derek is involved with a lot of the, like, everything from operationally, like meeting a lot of the team. Like, for us, it's about a culture. And in order for there to be trust between the athletes and our team, you know, we have a lot of really likable, great people that, you know, that can just hang out with a lot of athletes and have that trust. So I think there's an involvement from that. And then it's on top of, there's editorial. I mean, Derek has weekly video chats with our team talking about ideas and editorial ideas, so it really can run the gamut.
And so you were at Excel for like 15 years before, working with athletes, obviously, and you had a very successful career there. So what was Derek's pitch? Like, how did he pull you away? Or is that how it happened?
I think we started talking about this concept a few years ago, and I think once we started talking about it, and I think as the media has, you know, as headlines have been becoming more and more, you know, click-driven, right? As we've seen the relationship, I think, with the media and athletes maybe get a little more fractured, we realized there was more and more of a need for this. And as content became more and more relevant and important, especially when it comes from an athlete or an influencer, we saw the need. So I think once we started talking about it, it became almost, if the Players Tribune was out, we would be able to do this. Like, it became more and more obvious that there was a need for it.
Right. I mean, it seems like there's a lot of athletes. At one point, there was maybe a peak of it where you saw like Instagram posts where they'd write this essay in Notepad and screenshot it and post it on Instagram. So it seems like there was like a need, like a pressure release valve needed to be put in there. So that's kind of where you see yourselves.
Yeah, I mean, how many characters are on Twitter?
140.
140. I'm sorry, I'm not on social media. I try to stay out of trouble, but
stronger man than the most of us.
There's only 140 characters, so there's only so much you can say. So we wanted to give athletes unlimited space to tell their stories, and you know, like Jaymee said, we talked about this a couple of years before I retired, and we started planning it. But it takes a long time to build a company, and you know, when I retired, I wrote a letter announcing that it was going to be my final season, and I wished at the time that the Tribune was around, but it wasn't, and we actually launched right after I retired. So there was a lot of thought, and there's a long process to get going, but we've built a strong team. I think it's very important to surround yourself with people that can help. And a lot of our investors, like NEA, has invested in us, and they're known for building tech and media companies, IVP. So we've surrounded ourselves with great companies that have helped us get this far, but we need to continue to grow.
In addition to NEA and IVP, you also have some investors that are athletes themselves. Obviously, Kobe Bryant invested via his investment vehicle, and then some other folks as well, like Kevin Durant, so to speak, other folks like that. What kind of input do they give you? Like, do you have meetings with them as well, in addition to like them as investors as a board? Do you have meetings with athletes to get input on what they want from the platform?
We have over 50 athlete investors, I'd say, at this point, and we have meetings regularly with them. Every year we get together and have an athlete board meeting, but we do try to get together as much as possible because everything we do is derived from a lot of the athlete input. So it's something that's really important, I think. And it's also interesting from my standpoint, I don't know if you'll agree, to see athletes coming together from different sports, where I don't know that always happens. And so seeing, Derek with Kobe, with Richard Sherman and Cam Newton, I think it's really interesting to see how they all relate to each other. And that's, every bit as important as we grow the platform and thinking about what this community looks like.
And that's an interesting point too, because obviously you have people from different athletes, which are different sports, athletes of different sports. But I'm curious whether you think that this template works for other verticals. I mean, I'm sure there are directors and actors and musicians out there who have like a similar desire to express things unfiltered in a way. So I'm curious whether you thought about that, like whether this works for other areas.
We're working on that. We gotta get this one, but nobody heard that.
Got it. Right. So yes.
But yeah, it works. It works for many different. There's many different verticals it could work for, and we've had people reach out because they've seen what we've been able to do, and they'd like to do it in other verticals. But we have to get the sports side of things right first, and then you worry about building in other verticals.
So to that end, you just raised $40 million. What is this? I mean, you seem to be going along just fine. Obviously, you've got teams doing video and editing and multi-platform stuff. So what is the $40 million for? Like, why such a big chunk of money on top of what you'd already raised?
We to pay Jaymee.
Raises, got it.
No, I think honestly, video is so important to our platform. So doubling down on video is it's expensive. Also, just
yes, I know.
building and having the bandwidth to be able to scale the business so that we don't want to be saying no to athletes. We want to be there to be able to tell all the great stories. We're launching our podcast network. We actually launched it a couple months ago, and really focusing on bringing product and tech into internally. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot that we need to do. We're also thinking about international. So those are the focuses right now.
And have you thought about, this is sort of David, I'm not sure that this fits with what you do. Almost every media company out there is thinking about the subscription model, especially as you see companies like the Times and Post and such having success there. So have you thought about something where you offer people a subscription for greater access?
Yeah, I mean, we wanted to try our first revenue stream that we focused on was bringing in branded content. And how do we connect brands to athletes through this authentic storytelling and allow brands to amplify their spend, their sports spend, in a more strategic way. So we've really focused on building out the branded content model. We've brought in a substantial amount of money. We've worked with Samsung and Chase, American Family Insurance, Tyson, and really focusing on that. As we continue to grow the platform, we're doing more of a rinse and repeat model. We're doing our version of display advertising. But we're definitely looking in the future as we look at other revenue streams, and subscription is a piece of that.
And so you mentioned display advertising, which you've dabbled in. Do you find that to have a good return, or do you find it like to be a distraction as opposed to something where you can kind of prepare a package of content, have it sponsored, that's pretty much straightforward, and then get to do what you want?
Yeah, I mean, for us, the branded content is a great piece of it because it's a much more strategic, less transactional way for brands to be able to work with athletes instead of doing endorsements where you pay a lot of money for a transactional relationship that may not always seem as authentic. This is a great way for brands and athletes to connect. We're a little less interested, obviously, in the display advertising, but we do want to have a clean and smart version of that is a little bit more rinse and repeat.
So I mean, this is a question for Derek. I think it would be interesting to hear. Do you think that tech and startups especially are kind of like the new status symbol for athletes? It seems like more and more athletes, especially basketball players, seem to be getting really involved in the tech scene, startup scene. Obviously, Kevin Durant's an investor in Postmates. We have plenty of other folks. Obviously, Kobe has his investment arm. So I'm just curious to what your perspective is from the inside. Is that what you see? It's like not opening a restaurant anymore. You're investing in a startup.
Yeah, I can't speak on behalf of other athletes. I've always been a believer in you invest in things that you believe in. And I've believed in what we're doing here and what we're building at the Tribune. It just so happens to be a media company. But yeah, you see that nowadays. I think that's the hot spot now is for athletes to invest in tech. But for me, it's something that's very, very important. I thought this was necessary. I thought it was something that didn't exist at the time that we started it. Now there's other companies trying to do the same thing. But I think you have to be involved in things that are meaningful, and this meets a great deal to me.
And when you go to athletes and they're interested in participating on a greater level than just an article, what do you ask them? Like, what do you look for in them when they want to invest?
Well, first and foremost, we have a lot of athletes that have invested in the company because in my mind, it couldn't be called the Players Tribune unless the players had ownership of it. We've had athletes that have invested with us from day one, and those are the athletes that are important. Now, at this point, our most recent round, we had how many athletes that invested?
We have over 50.
Well, over 50. So, moving forward, I'm not exactly sure how many more athletes we're going to have invest in the company, but it's important. And the thing is, the athletes are proud to have ownership of this company. They walk around, and it's word of mouth. The athletes talk to other athletes. They share their experiences, and that's why we've been able to build this huge athlete community.
And you mentioned that you aren't on social media, and I'm just kind of curious if you had a perspective on how much social media has changed the business of sports. Like, does the social following, do you think it's at the point where it affects like a draft pick, or is it more along the lines of it can build a healthier franchise if you get the fans engaged and kind of talk to them directly?
I personally am not on it. Not saying I have anything against it, but yeah, to speak directly to the fans, that's what the fans want. It gives the athlete an opportunity to share their personalities and their interests directly to the fans, which is what we do. But I just personally have for other reasons, I've stayed away from it. I'm sort of archaic, I guess. I'm the old school guy. I never wanted to be that person that said, well, back in the day, but I've been called a back in the day guy now.
Yeah. Well, I was there when there was no social media too, and my kids are not going to be, so I'm already thinking about it. So you're at this point, you've gotten some on your belt. You have like obviously 1,500 contributors. You got 55 employees. What do you think your primary expansion is going to be? Is it the international? Is it podcasts? Like, what are you seeing in podcasts early on, by the way? Because I'm curious about that.
Yeah, for us, the podcast, it's more about storytelling, so twofold. One is about storytelling and almost like in a documentary type of way, how are athletes able to share stories in another format. Another part of it is being a resource for athletes when they retire, to be able to hone another skill and be able to, to work with us. And I think podcasting is a lot easier. So we just launched this last week. We had one with Atan Thomas called The Rematch, where Oakley was on it and sharing a lot of misconceptions that athletes may have. But then also, I think just diversifying our formats. We're talking with other distribution outlets and partnerships. We have one of the stories that we did, Letter to My Younger Self, with Vernon Turner, we're developing into a feature film right now. And then international is a very big piece of it.
All right, so we're almost out of time, but a couple of years ago, we had Bob Bowman on the stage, actually, who's the president of MLB Business now, and he was describing all of the additional tech and things that they had put into the ballpark. So I sort of have to ask, 2001, flip play, 360-degree cameras, HD, rewind, instant replay. Is that still an out?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was out.
I never had any doubt.
Thank you. Yeah, he called him out, so he was out. You can't change it now.
Very good. Well, thank you both very much. I appreciate it.
Appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. Thank you.